When you think of Cartoon Network, what do you think of? Some may say the 90s shows with shows like Dexter's Laboratory, Johnny Bravo, and Ed, Edd n Eddy, and some others say the 2000s with shows like Codename Kids Next Door or Chowder. Well, how about the 2010s decade? There are several answers that people would give you. Adventure Time, Regular Show, Gumball, Steven Universe, Clarence, We Bare Bears, OK Ko Let's Be Heroes, Infinity Train, etc. But we're not discussing those shows today. The show I'm talking about is the forgotten miniseries named Long Live the Royals. And when I say that this show had been forgotten about, I really do mean it. Heck, I'd even say that next to shows like Whatever Happened to Robot Jones and Sunday Pants, this is easily one of Cartoon Network's most obscure and forgotten shows, to the point where some of you might not have heard about this show until I and some other YouTubers brought it up.
Side note, I don't watch other YouTubers' reviews of shows I talk about until I finish watching and scripting the reviews in particular, something I need to remind everyone of now.
So, what is Long Live the Royals about? Well, to be entirely honest with you all, this show doesn't really have all that much of a story. This show is kind of in the same league as something like SpongeBob or Ren and Stimpy, as in, the show is basically about a royal family that is basically dysfunctional. Sort of in the same vein as The Simpsons, but more comedic in how they approach it, and that's really the most that we really get out of this show. One episode could be about a character learning to do archery, another can be about the others trying hard not to upset the queen about her loud snoring, and an episode can be about a character believing in a legend that the others believe is not real at all. It's one of those shows that at no point does it take itself too seriously, and what the show wants to do is make you laugh. To the point where a specific confusing thing that this show likes to do for every episode is that it often begins with the words
previously on Long Live the Royals.
And literally every single episode of the show does that. Like, legit. While I was watching through every single episode of this show in order to write this script, I honestly thought that every episode of this show was mislabeled or something. But then when I checked out the contents of the episodes, yeah, this could possibly throw people off, thinking that there's some sort of lost media in relation to the show. But there isn't. It's basically just there for a gag and that's it. But usually, shows only do this if there's an ongoing storyline or something. This was basically the case when it comes to shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender or The Legend of Korra. In other words, saying that there was a previous event that happened holds a lot of weight, and when Long Live the Royals first aired on television, I could imagine that this show might have thrown people off at the time as well. But getting into the contents of the show itself, what do I think about it? This show was fine. I can't think of anything that really annoyed me about this show, but at the same time, nothing notably good either. A major problem that I do have with this show is that the characters either don't have a personality or are extremely generic. And on top of that, they just have these characters doing things on screen, nothing that shows their personality, nor does the show do anything to really show what these characters are like. Peter, for instance, has no personality. In the pilot episode, he has this thing for the Duke's daughter, and he has a thing for a mud girl in episode 1, but that's not a personality trait. That's just him liking a girl and that's about it. He also seems to be called boring a lot. Gee, and I wonder why. It's almost as if he's on the same level of dull as Tommy Turnbull or Axel. Rosalind is your stereotypical teenage girl. Sneaks out every night, check. Wants to date a guy that her parents don't approve of, check. And has this specific attitude when her parents tell her no, that's also a check mark. And Alex is literally just Fang from Dave the Barbarian, but you gender flip her into a male. And that's it. He literally has the same level of not caring about royal duties and the same interest in hunting out in the wild rather than royal duties as much as Fang. The only characters which are actually interesting are the king and queen, though how they're written in each episode is extremely questionable. For instance, in the second episode, When Peter and Alex end up ruining things in front of the village, King Diego refuses to listen to Rosalind when she tries to tell him that it wasn't her fault that things ended up going wrong and grounds her, while completely ignoring Peter and Alex, who were actually the ones who ended up ruining everything.
Sadly, as someone who dealt with this numerous times, I definitely relate to Rosalind in this episode.
And in episode 3, Queen Eleanor constantly gets offended over the simple fact that people are trying to tell her, hey, you should do something about that snore of yours, it's keeping everyone up all night. To the point where the show actively implies that she killed a man because they commented about her snoring. And later on in that same episode, she acknowledges that her snoring is a problem, but she doesn't want to do anything to fix it, and actively wants to make it everyone else's problem instead. And generally speaking, this show seems to have a pretty similar problem that I pointed out with middle school moguls, where the show generally feels like it didn't want to be a miniseries at all, and more like a full-on show. But Cartoon Network, for some reason, didn't want this to be a full show, but Long Live the Royals definitely has the feeling that it didn't want to be like this, but they had to meet the demands of Cartoon Network. Given that a year prior, they did this exact same thing with Over the Garden Wall, and they probably looked at it and thought that they could strike gold twice. But Over the Garden Wall worked because Patrick McHale had his vision thought out for what he wanted the show to be like. And the show acted as some sort of TV movie or special that was specifically made like this, as sort of an Avatar or Gravity Falls type of miniseries. But for Long Live the Royals, it's less like Avatar or Gravity Falls, and more like SpongeBob or Dexter's Laboratory, where it's less focused on story or character development, and is more interested in telling jokes and having very loose continuity. Though the only thing connecting these 4 episodes is the ending of the 4th episode, where the characters come together for a feast, but other than that, you can start from any episode and you wouldn't be confused if you finished in any order. Almost as if this was Cartoon Network's test to determine if people would be interested in seeing this show as a full-fledged series, but that apparently didn't work, because after this show finished airing, barely anyone was even talking about it at all, despite the fact that Cartoon Network advertised this show like crazy, to the point where I remembered that a former friend that I want nothing to do with ever again told me about this show and if I would check it out because of how frequently it got advertised. But it is honestly kind of a shame that Long Live the Royals didn't really catch on, because I could have seen this show potentially improving as it went on and ironed things out. Given that first seasons are often like this, even SpongeBob took a while for it to get to some of its most iconic moments, but no, the very next year, Cartoon Network apparently showed more interest in Powerpuff Girls 2016, which we all know was so great. Back to Long Live the Royals though. As I stated, this show is alright. I do think that this show is better than Power Players and Bucky O'Hare, because this time, there was some enjoyment that I had while watching the episodes, but at the exact same time, the characters are not very interesting, and the overall amount of episodes leaves a lot to be desired.
Everything I